Our teaching and learning are taking place for a second day for grade 7 and 12 learners who went back to school yesterday. The Basic Education Department says the majority of schools opened yesterday. However, a small number were unable to open. Let's now find out what the assessment looks like from civil society. We welcome Noncedo Madubedube on Skype. Noncedo, a very good morning. You're the General Secretary for Equal Education. What has been your assessment as schools opened doors yesterday?
Yeah, so at Equal Education, we're a mass-based movement, an organization that organizes with learners and learners in different parts of the country. Yesterday, the grade 12 particularly went back to school. Some that are based in Gauteng, in the East Rand area in particular, staged silent protests or pickets outside their schools in the morning. And this is a result of folks feeling that having gone through school and conducted learner surveys for themselves to assess whether the school was ready for them to feel safe and an environment that was conducive for learning, but also an environment that matched that of their peers. They came out and said to us, look, we don't have running water in our schools. Some schools have tankers, sure, but most taps inside their toilets aren't working. Their toilet facilities are ill-maintained, and so they felt that it wouldn't be safe for them to go back to school because these are the non-negotiables that the Department of Basic Education had put on the table. So learners at the moment are running internal surveys inside their schools. They're assessing whether they're part of the 97% that is ready to be in school at the moment, or are they part of the 3%, and trying to figure out ways to engage their school management teams, their SGBs, to engage the district officers as well, to ensure that the conditions for them to be at school are conducive. And I think the second biggest issue outside water and sanitation for equal education in general is around the feeding scheme, so the National School Nutrition Program. The minister had initially said this program would reopen for all learners as schools reopen. And then later on she said, look, it would open gradually, but it would start with the learners that are inside school. And I think the advocacy and the struggle around feeding schemes and food in the country is a massive one. There is a humanitarian crisis around access to food during the various levels of lockdown. And so learners have said they need the minister to not backtrack on her own word and ensure that by the end of this week, the school nutrition program is back on track. And the food handlers that have been coming in and have been trained are ready to distribute food packages to learners more generally. And the last element, I think that is of concern for us, is the fact that the directives or the regulations from COCTA to the Department of Basic Education that allow folk to go in and out of schools during this period have some concerning elements to them. And two of those that I do want to just mention before we go off air is the need for learners to carry permits or certificates if they're going to be traveling between districts, between provinces. And we're worried about what this means for learners that aren't able to carry out this kind of sort of formal, online, in many cases, sort of process. Is the right to education being infringed for these learners? And the concern is that these learners will probably, or most likely, to be in quintile 1 to 3 schools. And so just the effect of that is worrying us. And the second is that we really do need the Department of Basic Education and our provincial departments of education to talk to us clearly as members of society about what support is going to be made available for learners that are gradually coming back into school over the next 2 months. And the reason we highlight this is because members of Equal Education that are learners have said to us at different times, it is so hard to catch up and learn from home. And we know that people in quintile, or learners, children in quintile 4 and 5, are carrying on with online and virtual classrooms. But those that are inside the northern rural areas of KZN and Ngquthu have said we have connectivity issues. The TV and radio programs don't allow for interactive learning space. And then in contrast is that also learners in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, in an urban setting, have shared the same concerns. So while we support the reopening of schools in general, we think it's important that there's a sustained access and provision for the things that the Department of Basic Education has called non-negotiables. And so we do want Panyaza Lusufi to look closely at the schools that held that silent picket yesterday in the East Rand. But last is that we do need a plan, I think more generally, on how we're planning to support learners that are at home during this period.
I hear your concerns, but just about the reality and the ability to sustain that provision. To what degree, in your opinion, are schools ready to ward off any possible COVID-19 transmissions within their premises?
So we're not convinced of that as well. It's a good thing that you've asked this question, because talking to comrades and members of Equal Education in the Western Cape and in the Eastern Cape, a couple of schools aren't following the same protocols around what happens when a teacher or member of staff contracts COVID or tests COVID positive. Some have closed, some have carried on as normal. Many principals that we visited over the last week had said to us, look, 2 teachers in the school, for instance, are COVID positive and they've gone off. In some cases, it's been principals, but the department hasn't come back to fumigate. And what the Department of Education, provincially at least, they've been running surveys to check that schools have the different things they need, but they aren't asking for quantity, they aren't asking who will serve or those things, resources procured are for. So, for instance, there will be a survey that says, do you have sanitizer? And you can either tick yes or no. There's no comment section. So a principal had said to us, look, I'm frustrated because we do have sanitizer, but it's all of 20 litres just for SMT and teachers, and nothing's come in for learners yet. So that kind of discrepancy and the process or protocol to follow when things don't match what the record shows in the Department of Education, we're still wanting questions, answers. We've got questions and we were looking for answers around what does the process and protocol look like in the event that someone in the school tests positive, whether it's a child or a member of staff. And we're hoping that the departments of education in the different provinces that we've written to will write back to us with this, so that we can have them share this, I think, publicly. I think at this point of schools having reopened and us gradually thinking about what curricula and modalities that schools are going to take and use going into the future, we really need a bottom-up approach. We need the full support, but also information to disperse and trickle down to members of school communities, because those are the people that are able to hold schools and support them in ways that are just and necessary during this period. So it's just unnerving to think that we're still struggling to connect with the departments of basic education at this point, but the anxieties on the ground from teachers and learners are growing because there's a lack of information, orientation and training and things of that sort. So I'm hoping over the next 3 days, teachers will at least feel a little bit more at ease, and which will translate to how learners are experiencing going back to schools. But at the moment, it's all very shaky and anxious, I think.
Noncedo Madubedube, we hope to continue to talk to you as this process unfolds. Thanks for talking to us this morning. Noncedo Madubedube is the General Secretary for Equal Education.